morning, Black New Mexico, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts, Living While Black in the Days of COVID-19. I'm Jim Harvey. I'm one of your facilitators for this podcast, and I'm joined by my illustrious co-facilitator, Tanya Covington, Jamal Martin, and we want to welcome you again. We have a really exciting program lined up for you today. And before we get into that program, just a couple of quick announcements. On Wednesday, June 24th, from 5 p.m. till 8 p.m., the Albuquerque Center for Peace and Justice will be hosting community conversations around the topic George Floyd after the march. What's next? Anyone is welcome, and you can attend in person, or by tomorrow there'll be an announcement out about the Zoom call capacity. So stay tuned for that, and we hope that you'll join us. Before we move into our featured presentation for the day, Sonia Smith, are you ready to give us your update for the week?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here again. So here are your COVID-19 testing updates for the week. And again, you can find all of this information on the Department of Health's website. Just press on the link that says dashboard. So to date, we have, and this is as of this morning, we have 10,565 positive COVID-19 cases. To date, we've tested a total of 293,431 people across the state. Unfortunately, we have lost 469 New Mexicans to this virus. But as I always like to say, the good news is people are recovering. So to date, we've had 4,684 people who have recovered from this virus. As far as being specific with how many Black people across the state have COVID-19, presently we have 210 approximately who are positive across the state. So last week we were in Hobbs, and then this past Saturday we were in Roswell testing. This week we'll be at UNM, and we're expecting a big testing drive over there. And you can find this information on the Office of African American Affairs website. And if you have any questions, please be sure to reach out to that office for more information. I think that's all I have, Jim. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia. That's really good. Always important that we stay up to date on what's going on with COVID-19. And as I look at the map, the national map, the one thing that we can be proud of, I guess you could say, is that we're still at the bottom of the list in terms of the number of infections and the numbers of deaths. And we owe a lot of that to the good leadership and the good stewardship of the New Mexico Department of Health, of which our own Sonia Smith is a member. So thank you very much. All right, let's go to our featured presentation for today. Gardening, canning, all kinds of good, I like to refer to them as survival skills in our own yards. And our presenter is someone who, every time I think about it, I want to put a pot of ingredients together and just take them over to our house and say, add all the spices I need, and I know I'm going to get a good pot of good food. That's our own Bev McMillan. Bev is a business leader, a community leader, a philanthropist. She's a native from Savannah, Georgia, that explains a lot, and reared in Akron, Ohio, and a graduate of the University of Akron with a BA in clothing and textiles. The Master of Business was attained in the year 2010 from the University of Phoenix. Bev began her career in retail management, which landed her a major role with the L Brands family, navigating through various roles in Victoria's Secret brand for over 25 years. Bev and her husband Leonard arrived in Albuquerque, New Mexico in early 2000s, transferring with Victoria's Secret to lead the Care Center facility in Rio Rancho. Both Bev and Leonard began actively working within the community, serving those citizens who were the most vulnerable, and she continues to do that to this day. Bev McMillan is a current member of the Albuquerque, New Mexico chapter of the Links Incorporated, and has been for the last 16 years and serves as the chapter treasurer. Bev is also a member of Iota Xi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Bev has utilized her time well within the Albuquerque area, serving on various boards to ensure the giving back to the community was an ever important attribute she received from parental teachings. Service on boards such as the Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, the United Way of Central New Mexico, Haven House Domestic Violence Shelter, Loveless Women's Hospital, and a trustee for the Albuquerque Community Foundation. Bev's most recent role as the marketing and fundraising chair for the Albuquerque Family Advocacy Center under United Way, New Mexico. Bev loves to garden in her spare time and believes communing with the earth is essential for health of mind. Bev loves providing for others and extremely committed to serving those who are the vulnerable and in need. The favorite quote from Muhammad Ali is her mantra: service to others is the rent you pay for your room here on earth. Listeners, friends, community, I give you Bev McMillan. Welcome, Bev.
I would say, is it still morning? Good morning. I've been up for a while. I know it's headed towards the afternoon, but it is my indeed pleasure to join all of you today. And what I would like to just give a caveat is, Jim, I've loved working with you throughout the years. Jim has threatened to come to my house, especially when there's oxtails being served, but he has offered to bring the ingredients, so I appreciate that. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started and talk about mastering gardening. Now, to your point, Jim, my mother is, and my family is actually from Georgia. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and they actually reared from Savannah, Georgia, which is 60 miles northwest of Savannah, Georgia, a very small town. But we were talking before we actually began the podcast is that I think everybody is finding their way back to the normal roots that our families raised us in. And if you can remember growing up in the 60s and the 70s, yes, I'm dating myself, that we all had gardens in the backyard and there was not ever a food crisis. And I don't ever remember being hungry. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were never hungry. So one of the things that I was able to do, I watched my mother. We actually had a place out back, and then I remember my parents, they actually rented spots, what we call out in the country. I grew up in Akron, Ohio. And so one of the things that I'm going to read to you today, and it's called Seed to Table. If we aren't being taught how to grow our own food, how to take care of ourselves and our families, and how to live without the need for huge governments, banks, and corporations, as our ancestors once did, then we aren't being educated. We're being indoctrinated to be dependent and subservient to the system. So that's one of the things that we want to talk about. You have to be a master garden. And what I have found out here in the state of New Mexico, gardening is a little bit different because it is dry and depends on where your land is. You have to talk about how you can actually prepare your land, or should you go with simple container gardening. So I'm going to be moving about quite a bit. And so you're going to see me like move time to time. And one of the things, one of the first things I want to be able to show you is like what you actually need to actually get is start your gardening. It's very simple. It's called mushroom compost and mushroom fertilizer. You can find these goods in just basic soil at your local gardening functions, whether it's Home Depot, Lowe's, and even Walmart. And I would always say, don't necessarily get the expensive brands. You can actually get the more economical plants, because dirt is just dirt. So one of the things after you get your dirt and soil fertilized is how you're going to be able to do that. So you can either buy seed packets, and you can have various different seeds, and there's still a lot of seeds out there, or you can start from clippings. So this happens to be a coleus clipping, but you can start it in water. And a lot of times, if you've gone to someone's house, you can actually cut a piece and actually get this started. So you want to make sure that you have your seeds and your seeds starting. The next thing is that you want to talk about containers. There's all kinds of containers that you can actually use. There's metal containers, there's clay pots. And one of the things I'm going to talk to you about today is, and people always laugh at me, but you can have things in a laundry basket. Now, yes, there's holes here, but what I normally do at times is I will cover it inside with this bird netting that you will find at any of your local gardening stores, just to actually have it covered and you won't lose your soil. So here's a good example of that. Move it about. So what you actually see here, and this is actually mustard greens that I actually have located in here. As you can see there, they're growing and they're tiny, but you can actually use this as a gardening compost. Now, just to start your seeds, I'm going to use a clay pot today. And some of the gardening components actually still have there's plenty of tomatoes I saw yesterday. There's plenty of peppers, so you can still plant. This is before July 1st. You've got about another week to get everything in. If you still want to have like a winter and fall gardening, there's still time, especially out in the state of New Mexico. So I've already taken this time. You want to first take your pot, and down at the bottom, you want to have little pebbles so you can get drainage. Like I said, any type of potting soil. And you just merely simply take this out and make sure that you're loosening up the soil so you can allow the roots to begin to spread. Once you've done that, what you can actually do is then fill this back up with dirt, as you can see here, and then pot it. And one main thing not to forget is to make sure that you have your pot labeled, because I have planted some things sometimes, and let's just like, this is a big beef tomato plant, so I'm just going to stick that right in there, and we actually have that actually completed. So that's one of the things that you can actually do as far as potting is concerned. Now, this is one of the things that you can do when we talk about having something that's already done. Potatoes are really easy to grow. So how many times have you seen in your, say, pantry, you have the potatoes with the nodules? These are seedlings that you can actually plant your potatoes in. So just going back to the basket syndrome, getting your basket ready, and you can actually have planted potatoes in here, and they grow phenomenally. And what you like about this, when they're ready to grow, you just pull them up and outwards. So I'm actually going to move to one of the locations where I could show you where I planted one a couple weeks ago. And as you can see, the seedlings are coming out. So those nodules that you saw, that's what's actually going on there. Also, there's other things that you can plant, and you probably can see this behind me, but this is actually turnip greens. This started off very, very small, and I can already see the turnips growing in here, but look how large and comprehensive this basket is that we have turned this out to be. The next things, I'm going to go back to seeds for a moment. So as you are even like going through your eating component right now and making sure that you have your seeds, you can actually start to dry your seeds, like from your eating your bell peppers. I have dried these for a week. I'm going to label these, and these are my bell pepper seeds that I will use next year. So I won't have to buy seed packets like this next year. Also, you can actually, there are seed envelopes where you can actually store your seeds. And I believe these are more bell peppers, and I actually have cherry seeds that are stored right here, and you can have them in there. And on the back, it says date planted, date harvested, and notes. And so sometimes you always have to make a note. Make sure you're labeling as you go, because sometimes you'll figure out the surprise. It's like, okay, what is this? What am I actually doing? And what you're going to see me do next now is actually move to my gardening space. Now, you don't have to have a large gardening space. Let me move my finger. But I'm going to turn around and actually hopefully you can see this as I come out. But you can see the gardening space behind me. So what has occurred here, I have potatoes. I have collard greens that I'm actually seeding for another individual right now. There are carrots that are out here. There are peppers, and the sun is beating me up a little bit out here. I have curly, but when we talked about the tomato plants, see how my tomatoes are really growing. And what I'll be able to do once this is done, I will actually be able to just pull from the bottom and pull them straight up instead of digging. So I'm going to come back to my workstation. Now, one of the things that we need to keep in mind is, and we'll probably have to do another segment of this at some other time, is to talk about how we actually preserve our food. So there's a canning process that you can actually go through, and canning takes a while. And so what I would prefer, if Miss Tanya would allow me to do this, you're going to do podcasts sometime in August, that we can come back and actually show you how to preserve your canning goods. But what I will tell you that I have right now is that I have done the different jellies. So this is our orange marmalade. This is butter and pickles. And then there's a component of freezing as well. So you can freeze your items. So, and it's just the main freezer bag, and just about a vegetable. You can just about freeze any vegetable that you might have that actually comes through. One of the things, gardening is relatively easy. Yes, sometimes there are pests, but there is way to get rid of pests naturally. So squirrels, rabbits, bugs, they hate the smell of this regular Irish Spring. So what I normally do is cut up in little pieces, and I spread them outside of the garden, because what I don't want to do is have the Irish Spring soap mix into the soil, because that'll cause you all kinds of other problems. But you can use peppermint spray and mothballs as well. It's like a deterrent, and they don't want to be there. Now, sometimes the rabbits, they will find their way, or they are, especially squirrels, they will dig their way through. But for the most part, I have very little bit of a rodent issues. Sometimes on the collard greens, you may have those holes where you talk about slugs in component. Some of this is going to naturally happen, because that means that it's usually sweet, or if you see somebody going towards it, they actually like it. And this, when you see ants and bees around your component, that means that you actually have a healthy garden that's going on. Leave them alone. They are part of the process. You can always, by the time you get ready to do your gardening and your canning, you'll be able to like execute to that. Some people ask the question a lot of times whether or not we use fertilizer. So right now, Miracle-Gro has this fertilizer that is strictly for organic growing. And all you do is put your hose on this end and actually use this. And I actually fertilize probably about every 14 days, because you don't want to over fertilize, because your roots would begin to rot out. So I'm going to stop talking right now and open this back up and turn to the question and answer period.
Thanks so much, Bev. Let's go to the questions and let's see what we have here.
Could you say a little more about drying seeds, Bev?
Sure. What you want to do with the drying of seeds is make sure you put those like in a windowsill and leave them out for a week, because what they'll do is season, and you can save your own seed. And like I said, that'll save you tons of money of seed buying the next year, and you can actually do that. gardening is amazing because I always say this: God didn't intend for us to actually be hungry. So the one seed pod that I actually showed you, it was that came from actually one bell pepper. It was a red bell pepper, and that's what I have to label it as that. But look at how many seeds that I actually was able to gain from just that one red bell pepper. Um, your potatoes are out there all the time. So what I've been doing as I've been getting this potato, I actually do another actually basket of growing, because that means that I'm going to have potatoes. I will be eating potatoes like through January, because it's a root vegetable. It actually stays, and it's not, it doesn't get hit by the frost. So you can continue to dig around it. Your ground is a little bit harder, but you still can eat potatoes down in January. I've eaten collard greens and your normal greens like your cabbages all the way into January as well. Christmas Day is my best day because I'll get carrots, I will get rutabagas, I'll get turnips, and I will eat out of the garden on Christmas Day. It's almost like it's a gift back to me from all the labor and the work that I've done.
Okay, Viola wants to know, what is the best way to engage children in gardening?
It's funny you should say that. Right now, we have a project with the Albuquerque chapter of the Links Incorporated called the 100 Garden Project, and we have been partnering up with Fellowship Missionary Baptist Church. They have a rites of passage program for their young boys, and that age range goes from 5 to 15. We actually, for the last 2 years, have been teaching them master gardening skills.
So I do have another announcement then while we're waiting for Bev to get back in. And that is from our educational person, Viola Cox-Henry, who was on last week. She has wants us to know about a scholarship opportunity. It's the Dr. Olivia D. Underwood Scholarship. It's open and available to May 2020 African-American female graduates of high school that are planning to major in a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics STEM field in August 2020. July 24th is the last day to apply. If you know of anyone who's interested, please have them request an application by sending an email to Dr. Dr. Underwood Scholarship at gmail.com. That's Dr. Underwood Scholarship at gmail.com. So if anybody has any questions about that, it's a wonderful scholarship for any young woman who's going into a STEM field.
I have a comment to make while we're waiting for questions.
Yes, go ahead.
First of all, while we're waiting for questions from our participants, audience participants, I would like to thank the OAAA and Beverly and the rest of the team for putting together this important concept about living while Black under COVID-19. As I listened to Sister Beverly again, as she gave us this talk about master gardening skills, I don't know if people realize just how serious and how important this work is as it relates to this aspect of master gardening. You know, she's given us some very spiritual and practical advice, you know, as it relates to ancestral wisdom and not being subservient to systems. But it speaks to this notion of self-determination. And it also speaks to the idea how COVID-19 has exposed both system and individual vulnerabilities in the society in which we live in. And so as we think about this life course tradition, this idea of helping young students also to learn to garden is an important thing, because the AME kindergarten that I attended in school, that was one of the things they taught us in kindergarten, about how to grow food and gardening and all kinds of things. And those lessons still stick with me today. Every time I see a carrot, I think about those experiences and what have you. But be this as it may, you know, as we talk about pre and post COVID issues, the vulnerabilities and sensitivities in society are revealed in terms of human vulnerabilities, environmental vulnerabilities. She's given us some wonderful advice about natural pest control and the importance of bees and ants as they connect with the system, two of my favorite creatures, you know, that God has put on this earth. So as we think about these things, it's important to know that the impact of nutrition on health promotion and disease prevention and control is so important. Most disease conditions are caused by gut immunity. And if you don't have vitamin A in your system, for example, your body has become, less resistant to certain infections and things of this nature. So eating the right types of foods, that type of harmony, that work is critically important. And I see Beverly's screen is back up, so I'm going to hush my mouth for a while, and let her get back to that ancestral wisdom from Savannah, Georgia, from the old school, from the old country, and how all that. And okay, last comment on this. People often forget that when we were kidnapped and brought here as slaves, we brought all kinds of food technologies and plants and foods and vegetables with us to survive on those voyages as well. And we grew those foods in America. It was commodified. So soul food is more than just some of the things we think about the deficit model. We came here with this notion of developing how to develop our humans, how to be adaptive, and resiliency, and food and building up that notion again to not being at the mercy of the food and agricultural industrial is an important thing in our lives and our survival. So keep on keeping on.
Sorry
Evelyn,
about
are you
that.
back with us? Thank
Yes.
you.
My iPad actually warmed up and just had this emergency thing on it, and it just went blank. The question was, right now, we actually have students in their 5 to 15, and they actually happen to be boys, and it's called the Rites of Passage. And there's a group of men that actually mentor from a mentoring standpoint for brotherhood. So these are brothers that are side by side with these young men. We have taught them master gardening skills. They learn how to build their own beds. We taught them the stem and the irrigation. So they actually had to lay the irrigation system. So that was stem involved as well. So they just went out there. And it was funny, when they first went out there, they wanted to have gloves on. And I told them to take their gloves off. And they wanted to know what they said, well, they'll get their hands dirty. I said, well, this is dirt, and this is what's going to happen out there. And they didn't want to get their shoes dirty. And I was like, well, that's going to happen too. But what I shared with them is that their hands were communing with the soil and the earth. And there is something magical that if you put your hands in the dirt, that dirt talks back to you and you talk to the dirt. And actually, it's been known to lower your blood pressure levels. A lot of my thinking process comes out there because you're just out there with the bees and all the other animals, and there's a circle of life out there. So I watch the geckos. The geckos are out there eating the beetles for me. The birds are taking care of those little white things that looks like moths, but they will eat your plants. And so you will actually see that happen. And to Brother Jamal's point, we have to get back to taking responsibility for our own health. Growing up in Georgia, we had peanuts all the time. And my parents' family would actually send big bags of peanuts during holiday, and they would be white and would be blanched, and we would roast them. I could eat peanuts. Today, I have peanut allergies and peanut troubles. That's because of how they are processing the peanuts. It's GMOs have been put into them, so they're mastering a different strain of peanuts. And that's why you see so much intestinal cancer now, and you see all kinds of stomach cancer that are going on because we're eating the wrong things. So everything that's sitting out in my backyard and everything in that Rites of Passage boys garden, it's all natural. Like I said, I can use some organic information and organic seeds and organic ways of doing things, but you do natural things to ward off other things. So we have to get back to that. And I see more people actually doing natural gardening now, because guess what? You can't go anyplace else. And that's actually getting done. So sometimes even I saw a question in the chat box, if you're a beginner, it's okay for you to be a beginner. Just start small. And you have to know that sometimes things won't work. I was at a person's garden yesterday, and they were going to plant corn, and they asked me about corn. I said, for some reason, I can't grow corn in my garden. I've tried it for 3 years. I live with that, but it took me like 3 years to get that soil built up, because like I said, the state of New Mexico has a different type of soil when you look at southeast and northeast, and you have to like figure that out. And it's okay for you to start small, but if you're starting out, I would encourage you to do container gardening on your patio. There's all kinds of things you can find on Pinterest. Google container gardening. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't take that while. And you will actually have fulfillment that you actually grew something by your hands. What other
So,
questions did you have, Jim? Go ahead and finish.
yeah, so I've got a question for you, Bev, and that is, does the size of the vegetable dictate the size of the pot that you start growing it in?
Yes and no. A lot of the size of the vegetable depends on how fast it's growing, how fast it actually likes that. So it's like you don't have to have this big pot, because I have had pots where vegetables have just grown out of it. So that's size doesn't dictate that.
Okay, great, thank you.
There was a question about the laundry basket and the bird netting, about how to do that.
I will send directions of how to do that, because all you do is just take the basket, cut the bird netting and put it inside, and then just add your dirt, and actually it won't move out. Some people think, well, do I have to do this? A reason why the bird netting, you allow that dirt to breathe, and you don't want to cover the full basket. So just do enough to actually cover this to the top of the basket, and you're going to kind of play with your dimensions and just put the dirt in there, and you should be fine.
Great. And then there was a question about what grows best in New Mexico and what grows best in pots.
It depends. What I've found here is where you live. So I'm in the northwest quadrant. I'm probably about one street over from Rio Rancho. And when I came here 20 years ago, I noticed that it was sandy up on this end. And so it literally took topsoil, mushroom compost, and it took me 3 years to get that garden well. I would say everything grows very well here. It just depends on where you're living and how you actually do that soil. Now, I have some friends that are closer to the mountains, and they talk about there is this chalk factor that's in the dirt here around the mountains in their yard. So
Right.
what I've told them to do is to make sure that they're doing patio garden, because I don't know if there was a volcano eruption or something. There's something about the soil on that northeast quadrant side, especially the closer you get to the mountains. It's just not amenable to growing vegetables.
And what grows best in pots?
Your tomatoes, your peppers will grow. I actually have collard greens. I've done cabbage. Just about anything that will grow really well in pots. You'd be surprised.
Okay, great. Thank you. More questions?
So Bev, if we start right now, I think I heard you say at the beginning that we've got enough time to realize a good harvest of vegetables if we do it right by
Yeah.
the end of the summer.
Yes, it's winter gardening, especially your leafy greens will be fine. You can do all of those. Sugar snap peas and cucumbers you can do right now, and you should be able to still see a harvest. Any type of potato, since it's going in the basket or going in the ground, they're going to be perfectly fine.
Great, great, wonderful. Does anyone have any more questions for Bev McMillan? Well, Bev, do you have a summary?
Take care of yourselves. Take control of what you're eating and putting into your mouth. And just try it. Don't be afraid. And no, you're not going to be a master gardener within a week. You're not going to be a master gardener within a month. You're not going to be a master gardener within a year. It's called trial and error. And you will know what will work best for you and your situation, whether it's in ground or you're potting. You can also please reach out to me in the PowerPoint presentation. I've left my contact information. Just call me, or you can actually email me with questions and I will actually respond to you.
Thank you so much, Bev McMillan. This has been really, really great. And, you know, as someone who loves his garden, you know, I'm out there every day, you know, tending to mine, and everything is in pots because, you know, I'm just not trusting of the soil here for many of the reasons that you shared. And things grow very well as long as I'm using the right mixtures in those pots. And I've even got sunflowers that come back year after year after year. I don't even have to touch them now, but they're all in pots. And it makes a huge difference. So now I'm going to go back out and make certain that my vegetables are doing well. And I thank you so much. We thank you so much for your sharing today. And maybe we'll all get together and have a big vegetable cook-up one day soon.
Sure. And like I said, what I would like to really come back to, and what I will do with that, I will actually video that and pre-tape it, is to talk about your actually canning in jars, because there is an art to that. And it's particular, you have to make sure that those jars are sealed and you give that water bath. But all of you that are sitting around here, I see the faces. Your mothers and grandmothers actually, they came in clumps and they came in clusters. They went to each other's house, making chow and making all kinds of things. But what we had was food all winter long. So you didn't have to go to the grocery store, and maybe you had to get your meats and eggs. But I would like to go back to that component. So Tanya, if you can see somewhere down in August, because that's when the bounties will start coming in and people will have like tons of stuff. I'm like, what do I do with it? So we can talk about putting things in freezer bag and securing your food, or actually putting things in jars as well.
All right, we'll look into that. We're hoping to be able to continue these podcasts. So that would be wonderful. And Dr. Jamal, I think you had a comment there.
Oh, I mean, in addition to my other comments, I was just thinking about how this opens up opportunities for folks to participate in their own food co-ops, and how we barter for service with others in the African American community. So there are so many other wonderful opportunities that involve this whole issue of returning to land. And you'd be surprised how many other spaces that we can do this in here as well, you know, in terms of public lands that are put aside by the city government, state government, for people to do community gardening and things of that nature. So this is a fantastic opportunity, again, to develop capacity and show our resiliency against all the vulnerabilities that are happening, you know, pre and post COVID. And in fact, to my sister Beverly, I would like to join that group of men who are mentoring and working with that rites of passage with the students, with the young men.
You know, we would love to have you, because during downtimes, they actually have speaking components, and I will get a hold of the communicators, because all the men on this call, I would love for you to be in front of those young men, and they actually graduate out of it, because, you know, it takes a village, and we have to, especially young African-American males, we have to protect them so they can be safe, but we have to seed into them as well. And so I would love to have you guys connected to them.
And I love gardening. I just don't do it as much here as I used to in the past. But in terms of a rite of passage, it is an important one. And when you look at the disappearance of all the Black farmers that have happened in the United States due to so many different processes, and not being connected to the land is a sad thing. It's a very sad thing. So thank you very much. You know, I'm looking forward to that.
Let me talk about that point for a second. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my background and history, and everybody talks about Juneteenth. In 1906, my grandfather was able to secure 100 acres of land in Sylvania, Georgia. And he actually farmed that land until he actually died. He passed it along to his children, which were my mother and her brothers. And he was a very smart man, because how he actually set up the deeds, that land is still existing in our family. We could not sell that land outside of the family. So when somebody gets tired and they don't want to pay the taxes, they have to call every last one of us up and say, hey, do you want a portion? So it has to go to the family. But I can tell you, my uncle Carlton, he was actually farming in the 70s, and this is by government design. And so that's kind of like that poem that I read, is being almost a slave to systemic policies. They called him up and told, he was a soybean grower, and he was growing soybeans for the United States. They told him not to do it. And matter of fact, they paid him double not to do it. And his farm was actually shut down. And, you know, he was sitting there going like, what am I gonna do? He became the school bus driver within the county there, because he had to have something to do. So there was 100 acres that was not being used, because that was price controlling at that time. But I am proud to say, in that Lovett and Ziegler family, that land still exists, and we are all recipients of that, and it cannot be sold from up under that family.
That's an important lesson to pass on, because so many of us find that, you know, we let our property get away from us. And, you know, we've seen this all across the board, and we've got to find ways to keep things in our families and in our communities, so that we continue to maintain that independence and that strength that's necessary. And this is the only way we can do it. And it's,
I was impressed with I was impressed with him that he had that forethought, that he
Yes.
did not want to see that land, because I would imagine, think about this, this was 1906 that a Black man was able to secure 100 acres. And his name was Dave Lovett, and they used to call the white people in town used to call him Brother Dave, and they loved him. But he was smart, Brother Dave, and he made sure that his family was taken care of. And we had to go back to a funeral a couple years ago. I actually went on the property, so there's pond, there's fish, there's all kinds of things that are going on. And a couple of my cousins actually have homes that are sitting on the land right now. But we are proud to say that that land is still in our family.
Hallelujah.
And that's a
That's
great
wonderful.
example.
Wonderful
And
news.
let me also say another wonderful thing, Bev, about you teaching these young men about gardening. I have been hearing from several people who are older and feel like they can't quite do as much gardening, but they would be willing to let somebody come in and work their yard. And they would, help with the upkeep if someone would do the planting and the weeding. So again, maybe this is another way that we can start a gardening co-op within the, African American community.
So let's talk offline about that. It's funny you should say that, because to your point, there is a member of the church, and she's a female. To your point, she can't do too much. She has gifted that land in the back, and we're going to till it next week to get started. And so what we're going to do is to probably, to your point, Brother Jamal, that could go into the food pantry. We'll be able to feed individuals. Maybe we'll give some to the storehouses, but she has gifted that land to us to make sure that it's being used. And it'll probably give her something to do, because sometimes you just can take a chair and maybe she's back to just kind of pulling off some of the dead leaves, but she will like it as well. But she has gifted that land to us.
Outstanding.
Great.
And this is another way of connecting the youth, ecological systems, environmental racism, and realizing that this is part of their heritage. This is part of their ancestry. And there's nothing wrong with it, but putting your hands in the dirt. Dirt is clean unless it's fouled with all kinds of pollutants. So it's a fantastic opportunity on so many different levels. So thank you again for this discussion. And
so count again as well, Bev. We thank you. We really appreciate you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Really do. And we look forward to extending this and getting some more good news from you as time goes by. Yeah, like to see what's happening. We really appreciate you. Tanya, do you have any additional announcements?
Just like to make the same announcement again, that the Dr. Olivia D. Underwood Scholarship is now open and available to May 2020 African American female graduates of high school that are planning to go to college in August and major in the STEM field. Anybody who is interested, please send email to the Dr. Underwood Scholarship at gmail.com.
All right. Dr. Martin?
No, I'm just sitting here thinking again about the importance of agricultural models.
Yes.
And what that means for health and well-being, and being connected to the land again. And then I'm excited about the idea of working with young Black men in particular to get them interested in this. And again, I thank Beverly and all for bringing this conversation to the table, because again, it's a great intervention and protection and build protective factors against health and illness.
It sure is. It sure is. So again, to our listeners, Bev has included a PowerPoint. So if you have additional questions or you want to access the PowerPoint, please contact us here at the Office of African American Affairs, and you can get that information sent to you so that you can hopefully start engaging in the exciting world of gardening. I think it's a fascinating and wonderful thing to do. So we thank you again. And we thank all of you who sent in your questions today. And I see that there are several people that indicated that they're ready to get started with their gardens. So Bev, don't be surprised if you start getting some special requests from folks. All right. All right, this concludes our podcast for this week. We hope that you all enjoyed it. And again, thanks to the Office of African American Affairs, to the state of New Mexico for making this possible, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Meantime, be well, stay safe, stay healthy.